I'm obviously very curious in terms of the casting of Dan. I think that's a very inspired casting choice. And I was wondering if we talked about when you were in South by Southwest, we talked about your next in casting Sharni, and that was also a very inspired casting choice. So can you talk a little bit about what was the impetus that made you want to say this guy can play this character?
Well, I mean, he just fit perfectly into what that character needed to be, which is somebody that you kind of would just naturally trust. You know, Dan has like a very likable, like just natural, charm to him. So, that was kind of what we were looking for, was somebody that it would be believable that in this situation that this family would let him into their home. And beyond that, Dan just, he has like a coolness to him that just kind of fit the character, and he was just ready to do something like this. He got the sense of humor of it, and so it was pretty straightforward. Once I met him, I felt pretty comfortable. Like, this is the guy for the movie. Like, he was one of the first meetings I took on the film, and I met a lot of actors in that kind of age bracket, and from the get-go, I was like, this is the guy.
Well, I imagine when you're screen testing, at some point you say, like, okay, now do this dead-eyed, steel face.
Well,
I never screen testing.
Oh, you never screen tested?
No, not for that. It was just meeting with them. Meeting with a lot of actors, and I think if it had gotten down to that point, we would have done it. But like, it was clear that he could do it. I mean, the real question is like, something like that makes maybe like your foreign sales company is a little nervous because he's not known for doing this thing, so it's not an obvious sell. It was more about like getting beyond those kind of barriers than it was because I've already seen him in Downton. I thought he was a great actor, and in his take on the character and his personality was spot on. Well, I mean, and that's one of the things too, is I feel like a lot of times when you cast actors, you want to cast from their natural personalities. You want to see if they already have a good amount of what you're looking for ingrained in them naturally, and that'll just like come out through the performance. As long as they can hold their own, even if it's in a totally different role, I feel like it'll translate.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say that your next was really badass. This was also badass, and the fact that you said that both of them were in the same universe. Mm-hmm. I want to see the character of Aaron from your next and the guest from this one go at it in the third one. And you can call it the guest is next. So now that you've done two of them, what's the third one, gentlemen?
Well, we don't really know what's up next for us. There's another project with the same producers that kind of is almost a continuation of this like filmic philosophy, if you will, of combining a bunch of different genres and crazy ideas that's progressing quite nicely, but we might end up doing like a studio project first. We've got like I'd say we have like 3 films on our plate right now, and it's just a matter of trying to figure out what order they're going to go in.
Okay.
But we don't tend to talk about our films until we're done making them, for a lot of different reasons, but one of the least of which is that I find it personally hard to be excited about movies if they've been overhyped to me via like social media and whatnot. Too often today I'm sick of a movie before I even see it, or before I even see a trailer for it. And so I kind of want people to have kind of the opposite response to our films, which is like they discover them when they're more ready, when it's more easy for them to see them, they don't have to like think like for like 2 years like, oh gosh, though that did happen with your next, but that was a different thing.
Yeah.
But when we premiered your next, I mean, we hadn't announced that movie was happening until it had its Toronto premiere announced, and that worked really well for us actually, because one of the reasons I think Lionsgate was excited is because it kind of came in under their radar. And I think we'd like to kind of continue to do that, not just for studios, but for fans.
Yeah.
But if we did do a Your Next sequel, I think you cracked the code. It's like it's got to be like Alien versus Predator.
Yeah,
they gotta go at it.
That would be an amazing crossover with that.
And Joe Swanberg's character from Horrible Way to Die. Somehow he survived.
Or his character from Your Next, he just has like a whole bunch of things.
So the film definitely has kind of an 80s vibe to it, like a nice throwback to some of the 80s genre films. Did y'all know going into it that you wanted to do that, or did it just kind of play out as you were making the film?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was cooked in from the beginning because, rewinding back to the kind of genesis of this whole situation, prior to Your Next and including Your Next, we always had to, to be able to raise money for the films, we always had to kind of pick a specific subgenre that was more or less a safe financial bet for the investors, and because we weren't safe financial bets yet ourselves,
Yeah.
So the best way to do that was to pick things like serial killer subgenres or home invasion, which is what Your Next was, and that's how we got those movies financed. And after Your Next was our first success, we were in this new position where we were able to choose our projects differently, and and that was actually an interesting kind of learning curve, because we'd been kind of building our careers up to that point, but not really necessarily thinking about what happens after you get to that point. It was always about...
Yeah, we'd be lucky to even get there, It would have felt like a jinx almost to plan out. and after we have our big...
Exactly.
After we have our big wide release from Lionsgate, then we'll do this.
Yeah, you always just kind of assume that that'll just work itself out, But once we were there, it took a little bit of figuring out what we wanted to do as filmmakers, not just as, essentially like film beggars, you know what I mean? And so it all kind of culminated though with, one day I was at the Snoot offices, that's the production company that did Your Next, and I just had a stack of Blu-rays with me, and I just happened to put on the original Halloween and the original Terminator, and when I watched that, I just realized that those movies really encapsulated, the reason I wanted to become a filmmaker in the first place. And so I called Simon up and I kind of pitched him this insane cyborg idea, but it turned out that that idea in itself, kind of fit in a weird way with an older idea you had.
Yeah, it just kind of fused kind of nicely with this drama that I kind of tried to write back in 2007 and abandoned because I didn't feel like it was working, and I didn't feel like it was also a film I could get made.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of speaking to what Adam was talking about, where at that point in both of our careers, it wasn't like people were throwing money at us. So it didn't feel like this was worth my time, but I liked it. I liked the dynamic of the mysterious kind of soldier showing up and claiming to have known the family's dead son, and I liked kind of where those initial pages had gone. I just could never kind of find the right tone to approach it with. It kept going too much towards somber, if that makes sense, or self-serious. And I didn't want to appear like I was commenting, on a military experience that I myself hadn't had, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really when Adam kind of talked about making it, we both kind of, we're both in our 30s. I'm quite a bit older than Adam, but still in the same, decade. So we kind of, the movies that we were most aware of, at the time that we became conscious enough to love films, it was the 80s. And, the films that we really imprinted on were those 80s genre films. So I realized that kind of approach to that subject matter was a really kind of successful fusion. And then after that point, the script actually was able to come out fairly quickly, considering that I unfortunately had to work on a few other projects at the time,
Mm-hmm.
which aren't happening.
Yeah, so strangely the stylization, that I brought to Simon fused well with the script, and then it all became one thing. So, and that kind of is a good example of the way we work, where, I let Simon, be the writer. I don't try to get involved in that process, because Simon is going to come up with better characters and stories.
As I said, as Adam's elder, he really looks up to me a lot for life advice and things like that. He's kind of like a son I never had.
Yeah. So basically, I'm just Simon, could you throw in some Halloween shit so I can film it? Because I love the way Halloween decorations.
And also, here's this goth song. Do you think? Are you writing a script that I can put this goth song
Exactly.
in? And I'm like, oh, I guess I better.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it is. It's funny. This was actually one of the first films. Especially the music, because I would say that not a single song that's in the film was a song that I'd heard before,
Mm-hmm.
which is unusual. I mean, we were both really kind of obsessive about music and have huge music collections. But I just didn't have that kind of knowledge overlap of early kind of electronic goth stuff, which Adam was super aware of. So it was kind of him sending me the music really guided my creative process in terms of finding that tone. Just being able to kind of listen to those tracks. And I think we've kind of continued to work that way on future scripts. It's more like when I'm writing, Adam will kind of send me a song, and I'll be like, oh yeah, this is perfect. But but also Adam really does. you know, like he just knows a ton about bands that are out there in the world. So I discovered a lot of kind of music that I like through him.
Thank you.
Just a small.
That answer went all over the place. That answer like spiraled into like something else.
The music like really reminded me of Drive. I mean, I don't see a lot of horror, thriller films, but that evoked Drive to me.
Yeah.
But separate from that, how do you guys kind of make your films original? Because I feel like the horror genre, especially not that this is strictly horror, I thought of more of it as a thriller. How do you keep it interesting and unique?
Well, do you want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like for us, it's not about avoiding the pratfalls and all the tropes necessarily within these genres. It's almost more like embracing them and trying to put them in new context, you know. And going back to Drive, that's a great example because, you know, I remember when I saw that film, I was really thrilled by it because it was the first time that I had seen a mainstream movie that was able to utilize that 80s electronic aesthetic, even though all that music in that film is modern, but it all had that retro, on-the-nose 80s kind of feel. And that was almost like the, it wasn't something I was necessarily, you know, drawing on when we were filming the movie, but it was like sort of the catalyst of being like, this is something that people are ready for, to be able to go back to this, and it can be a mainstream thing, you know, because if we were just doing some fringe, like, you know, wank off like 80s, like, you know, retro fest, you know, I wouldn't be interested, but if it's something that we could bring to your average audience member and your, you know, horror fanatic or genre fanatic of all types, you know, that was something that was more interesting to me. And Drive was the kind of starting point for that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah, and in terms of writing, I mean, I just really try to write things I haven't seen before, and I try to watch also a lot of movies. I would say I probably watch more films than Adam, and certainly like whenever we're at a film festival, I really force myself to watch a bunch of garbage. But there's a reason for that, which is that I think it, as at least you know, the way that I approach kind of filmmaking or screenwriting is you know, I feel like if I don't know what's happening on the vanguard or outer edges of cinema, then I don't know how to be innovative with my own stuff, you know. And to me, it's just that, you know, I never would want to imitate something that I'd seen before. It's more like taking inspiration from it and then trying to do something new with it. I would just say, you know, like in terms of how do we be original, I would just say it's that. It's just that we try to be original.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a conscious choice. It's a conscious choice to make movies that don't overtly resemble other films and that aren't following like an obvious trend.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
I think that's perfect. Right?
Thank you. I'm the last one. I'm heavily obsessed with martial arts stuff.
Oh, great.
So anytime I see any kind of action, anything like that, first thing I start looking at is how realistic does it look, how accurate. What was y'all's approach to create kind of the style of his fighting?
Well, luckily Simon does a lot of martial arts, and he's a teacher. You want to talk
Which is
a little more
obvious.
to that? You know?
Well, you know, I should say first of all that a gentleman who resides in Dallas by the name of Clayton Barber worked with us on Your Next and The Guest, and he was kind of our action stunt choreographer, and he worked not only training both Sharni for Your Next and Dan for this film, but he really worked with Adam and me, you know, to take what was kind of on the page and make it work on film. You know, there's certain things that are, you know, entirely original to Clayton, like when he dodges the punch and uppercuts the guy. Yeah, but you know, but I you know, but I mean, that would work. And Clayton actually has coached the U.S. Olympic Taekwondo team.
Awesome.
He's quite a good martial artist. I mean, Taekwondo, you know, whatever your opinion on that is, you know, some people kind of think that that's more of just like a kicking drill.
I teach it too, so.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I'm free to
Yeah,
insult
yeah.
it, but I'm
No, Clayton is, I mean, there's some people that can really make it work, and Clayton is one of them. I mean, and you know, and like, yeah, I do have a couple black belt degrees myself. Not in Taekwondo, though I did train in it at a young age. But you know, we're able to speak that language kind of fluently.
Well, and the way that Simon writes too is that the action scenes are very well ingrained in the writing. It's not like, and you know, because I've read like some writers are just like, and then there's an action scene. You know, it's never like that. It's like Simon always hits all the beats, and then when we actually get the location,
Yeah, they'll
then we
change.
usually have to augment it to fit the location, especially, maybe not so much necessarily the hand-to-hand stuff, but usually more like the big shootout stuff in the film. It's like, oh, well, this room doesn't actually connect with this room, and so we have to figure out a
this
different
house
way.
doesn't have a second floor.
You know, and that's always an interesting process of trying to figure out the architecture of fight choreography within the confines of not what was necessarily written, but what you end up with.
But Adam and I kind of initially bonded over our love of Hong Kong cinema. John Woo's movies in particular, and I think you watch a lot of American films, and some of the fight scenes are so just boring. Because they're either so like fake or and you can just tell. And the fact that we kind of grew up watching instead of that sort of thing, we watched Jackie Chan obviously a bunch, and really great fight scenes that have that real physical kind of like unpredictability to them. And I think that's just our aesthetic. I tend to be very bored by big Hollywood action scenes because it just feels like everyone's invincible. Whereas I love those Hong Kong movies where it just feels like everyone takes damage. So working with Dan, we just made sure that was a big part of it.
We always make a joke that like at the end of both of our films that we've done that have like a major action star or who's the centerpiece of the film, that at the end of the movie they're always limping, they're always taking damage, and I've always loved that aesthetic in movies when the hero is just they're really fucked up by the end.
But we're not going to settle for something that looks fake, And Dan happens to be very physically adept, just as an actor, and he was able to get really fast and good. But we wouldn't have we wouldn't have moved on if it wasn't looking right. It's just about kind of just having that aesthetic ourselves. And we're friends obviously with Garrett, who does like the Raid films and stuff, and he kind of raised the bar, I feel like, a little bit with those films too. So we're at the
It's kind of one of those things where you're like, well, we'll take a different approach to action because you don't want to fuck with that Raid style. And also, you don't have 130 days to shoot a movie.
Yeah. But we were at the world premiere of the Raid, and we were at the world premiere of the Raid 2, so we're able to get research.